Welcome back to our study. At the end of our last video, we commented that what we do and how we do it and where we do it matters. It sends certain signals about who we are and what we value. I'd like to pursue that a bit further in this video. In my professional life, I had the opportunity to work on organizational performance issues for many years, trying to help organizations improve their collective performance. And oftentimes that meant putting in certain programs or plans or initiatives and trying candidly to change the culture, to get a company to have a different culture that performed at a higher level. And as a part of that, we would do extensive, detailed change management planning, how to get from point A to point B and get people involved and the right people on board, etc. And one of the parts of that change management planning was to look at unintended consequence analysis. Let me say that again, unintended consequence analysis. In other words, what we would do is say, as we put this and this and this in place to accomplish certain things, what are some of the other behaviors that might drive? Things that we don't necessarily want to happen or that we clearly don't want to happen, but could result from that. That unintended consequence analysis proved oftentimes to be one of the most valuable things we actually conducted to keep an eye on that. I'd like in this video to share with you a few thoughts on the unintended consequences of having so much of our church life and our church activities based out of a church building. I believe it does matter, as I've said, and I hope you'll listen and think along with me as I share a few ideas about that. If I turn to Acts 2, it says that daily they met and house to house that they met. Over the years, my wife and I have had people into our house, and I will tell you that spending one Friday or Saturday evening for 2 or 3 hours with someone and around the dinner table or on the sofa in the living room and just chatting with them, we can develop a deeper relationship in a couple hours than spending years going to a worship service with them. There's something about being in people's houses, and so we lose that when all we do is meet at the church building in our formal settings. And I think that's an unintended consequence that we need to consider and think about. Most church buildings are also built like an auditorium with a central focal point and a stage, and so everything happens there. But I look in 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and I see an interactive, participative process when the church assembles, where multiple people are being involved. And that's difficult, if not impossible, to do when we build a building and put a focal point and the same person preaches the sermon every week and there's minimal opportunity for others to get involved. That's another unintended consequence of the way we have decided to conduct ourselves. I also know from personal experience that we may have a big crowd and very shallow relationships. Hi, how are you? I'm fine, good, nice dress, thank you, beautiful new tie you bought there. We're not developing relationships and the bond of fellowship like we've talked about before by those superficial relationships, and that can be promoted because of where we choose to meet. One of the other unintended consequences, and I'm guilty of this, and many people I know are, I delegated the teaching of my children too much to those things that happened at the church building, the Bible class, the youth group, whatever. I have the responsibility. It's clear in the Bible. My wife and I have the responsibility to train our kids up in the way of the Lord. But when we always go to the church building, it becomes too easy, too convenient to let that be the only place. And that's a shame and something I regret in my life, and I've talked to many others who feel the same way. We didn't intend to do that. It was an unintended consequence. We also spent a lot of money on ourselves. I will tell you a very quick story. I had the chance to be at an intensive leadership workshop a few years ago. It was in Philadelphia, and we worked from a holiday on a Monday through the following weekend 2-week course. And in that middle weekend on Saturday, we took a bus ride through Philadelphia on a historic economic tour of Philadelphia. And at one point, we stopped in an area of Philadelphia that used to be a thriving part of the town, making products that went all through the country and the world. But as time went on, those products weren't as valuable, and that section of town had now become run down, dilapidated, lots of empty buildings, crime, homeless, etc. We stopped on a street, and our tour guide pointed us to the left side of the bus, and there was a large cathedral. That cathedral had been there through all those generations, and it was still there in all of its grandeur. And he was able to talk to someone and let us go inside, and we saw the stained glass and the sculptures and the beautiful woodwork, and it was grand. And then we came back outside, and on the other side of the street was homelessness and drugs and poor and how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions over the years had spent on keeping a building looking nice when there was poverty across the street. How much money do we spend on buildings when there's poor and other needy around the world? It's an unintended consequence that we spend so much money on ourselves. I've had the chance to be in church leadership. I remember when I was first given the opportunity to serve as an elder in my church, and went to the first few meetings, and we talked about the parking lot, and we needed a new roof, and we were going to refinance the mortgage, and when did we start talking about people? I was shocked and disappointed how little we spent talking about people, and I mentioned that, and we spent a bit more time, but you know what happens over time. We slip back in. What happens is, when we have these buildings, our church leadership starts running a business instead of being elders and pastors and shepherds for people, which is really what the church is. An unintended consequence is that we start it out as a church and we turn it into a business. Give you one more. Matthew 18 talks about what to do if someone sins against you. It says, go to them, talk to them. If they don't hear you, take one or two with you. If that still doesn't, take it to the church. When we have a building and we have 200, 300, 400, maybe even a few thousand people, how do you do that? How do you take that to the church? Many of those people wouldn't even know the two people involved. What are they going to do? Well, he's got a better suit. I'm just telling you, one of the unintended consequences sometimes of the way we do things in our buildings and our bigger crowds keep us from really being able to implement clear instruction out of the Bible. Things like church discipline in Matthew 18. I want to remind us at this point, as comfortable as we are and as proud as we are perhaps of our history and our beautiful building, and we've grown and we've expanded it, and etc., as we talked a few videos ago, that what we're doing is not working. Church attendance and church affiliation has been declining steadily for 60 years in this country, and it's picking up a pace of decline in the last 20. We shouldn't fool ourselves that what we're doing is working, because it's not. Worldly values continue to incorporate and infiltrate against our biblical values, and all kinds of research and surveys show that it's not working. More than 70% of our kids who are raised in the church leave the church at young adulthood. So we can say everything's fine, but it's not, and how and what we do clearly is a part of that. I've seen it in my life, I've seen it in my family, I've seen it with others. These are unintended consequences. We didn't set out to do that, but it happens, and we need to deal with it. Look, I understand there are a number of reasons why the church may be in decline and why our numbers are doing what they are and our kids are leaving. But clearly a part of it is about what we do, how we do it, and where we do it, and where we concentrate it. Church is not to be done in a building. Church is to be done, I'm the temple. It's to be done in ourselves and in our homes, and maybe we should stop relegating everything to a building. I hope you hear this with the intent it's meant. I'm not trying to judge or be harsh, but as the group and I studied, we couldn't help but realize there could be a real problem here. We may have been putting limits on ourselves and putting God inside four walls that Paul says clearly he cannot be, but we may be trying to do that. The question we kept coming back to, if it isn't working, why do we keep doing the same thing? In our next video, there's a few more thoughts to share with you about church buildings and the impact they have on us, and maybe some of the objections people have to things I've said. We'll cover those in the next video, and then we'll carry on with some more important topics. I hope you'll continue to join us in our study.